and the hopes of a ceasefire were shattered. A volley of rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip toward the southern communities of Israel. A short while later, long-range projectiles were also launched toward areas south of Jerusalem, setting off sirens in the Etzion settlement block and Beit Shemesh for the first time since the violence erupted. No injuries were reported in the late morning attacks. In the afternoon, and in response to the rocket fire from Gaza, the IDF, in a targeted assassination, took out another senior member of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group, bringing the total now to 6 eliminated commanders. Many of the fresh short-range rockets from Gaza on Friday were downed by the Iron Dome air defense system or landed in open areas. The medium-range David Sling's air defense system, however, made a second-ever successful interception during the rocket attack directed at the Jerusalem area. While the Iron Dome and David Sling interceptors have shot down more than 90% of rockets fired at southern and central Israel, malfunctions happen, as it did on Thursday in Rehovot. The failed interception and direct hit on a house killed an elderly woman, Inga Abraham, 80 years old, marking the first Israeli death in this round of fighting.
It was, I think, at about 6 p.m. I was lying in bed and I vaguely could hear the alarm sounding. At first, I actually thought it was from a nearby city, like maybe Ness Ziona or Rishon. I was like part awake, part in a dream. And after what seemed like about 1 minute, then I had the explosion, and the ground shook a little.
Meanwhile, on Friday, Israelis were inspecting the damage done to the house in Rehovot, especially after concerns were voiced by medical and emergency workers at the scene that due to the supporting beams being damaged, the entire building may in fact collapse. And with me here in studio is Rafael Yerushalmi, a former senior intelligence officer in the IDF and a security analyst. Rafael, just before we started the broadcast, you mentioned to me that the demonstrations that would have been going on now for a 19th week have been cancelled tomorrow night because of the situation on the border region between Israel and Gaza. Talk to us a little bit about how this plays into politics. Yesterday, we asked a question whether or not starting or at least engaging in a war with Gaza was for any purposes some kind of political gain.
Yes, Benjamin Netanyahu has been suspected of starting this conflict because he would divert the attention from the internal strife in the political life of Israel. I would personally think that it's a little far-fetched. I mean, the price seems a bit high. I'm sure he's not too sorry that this is happening because it does divert the attention from the political strife, but I don't think he initiated this kind of situation. Unfortunately, it was coming. I think it is more the interest of the Iranians to initiate this kind of situation. They have a little indirect war, maybe with the more to the right parties of the Israeli political map. Right now, there is a kind of a little war because we have on next Thursday the Jerusalem March, or the March of the Flags, which is always considered as a provocation. I would like to remind you that it's never been a provocation at all. It is a march that has been practiced for many years, very peacefully with Israeli flags. It's a festival. It's with children, elderly people. Of late, it has been said that it's a provocation because it goes through the old city of Jerusalem, like the Arab quarters, and because many Arab countries oppose it. But there is no provocation there. But the Iranians are building on this. They seem to have ordered the Islamic Jihad to hold until then and to disrupt this march. I remind you that the Islamic Jihad, in its claims for a ceasefire, amongst its many claims, would like this march to be cancelled, which of course the Israelis will never do, especially today with the political map and the right parties absolutely wanting to do the march and absolutely wanting to go through the Arabic quarters, of course. So all this imbroglio of political life in Israel and this attack, of course, also there was the feeling amongst our enemies that the political strife in Israel was weakening the country, and they have actually strengthened the country. There's a lot of solidarity, there's a lot of unity that we hadn't seen for many weeks because of the different opinions in Israel. And right now the Israeli people are very, very united, and the opposition is supporting the government, so it's exactly the contrary effect that they have obtained.
Stay with us just a moment. I do want to cross now, though, to the south, where our correspondent Hamda Salchut is standing by in the southern city of Sderot. Hamda, over 1,000 rockets fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza at Israel, mainly at the south in recent moments. What have you been seeing and hearing on the ground there?
Good evening, Batia. Here about an hour ago, we did have a direct interception right over our heads. There have not been sirens in Sderot since the early morning, but there have been sirens and red alerts all across southern parts of Israel, including even in Jerusalem. The Israeli military says that they're expecting more long-range missiles from Palestinian Islamic Jihad coming out of the Gaza Strip. But here in Sderot, it's a little bit quiet, especially because it's Friday evening, the beginning of the Jewish Sabbath. And we did run into the mayor of Sderot here, who did have some strong words to relay. Take a listen.
We will stay here as long as necessary. And if we will need to stay in shelters for another 20 or even 30 days, we will. We will give our full support to Prime Minister, our country, and our military to protect us. Leaders of the outer world, wake up. The responsibility is on Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Make them lay down their weapons, because the violence causes only suffering for the entire region, not only to Israeli, but mostly to the Gazan residents that are looking for a future, for security and education. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad are taking all this money, stealing it from the residents. They make this money and buy weapons, bombs and rockets. What good has that given them over all these years?
The mayor of Sderot there making mention to Hamas, the de facto rulers of the Strip that have so far been on the sidelines, but we know that they have sent a message via Egypt that if fighting continues, they will get involved. Hamza, how would this change the course of the conflict?
If Hamas were to get involved in this round of fighting, the escalation would be sure to be seen on both sides of the aisle, both here in Israel and in the Gaza Strip. Hamas has more sophisticated weapons, more long-range missiles, weapons we haven't really seen in a couple of years. So their arsenal has been stockpiled, perhaps waiting for a round of conflict. Now, because of the civilian casualties and the toll on the civilian infrastructure that's been hit, sources are saying that there is going to be no choice but for them to get involved. We can be sure to see a much longer and devastating conflict if they're to get involved. They've been speaking out today more than they have been since Tuesday, saying that the resistance in the Gaza Strip is united and ready.
Hamda Salchut there in the southern city of Sderot. Stay safe. We will be coming to you later on in the broadcast. And just to update you, just moments ago, red alert sirens, incoming rockets were going off in the Gaza envelope area. So those residencies and communities just outside of the border between Gaza and Israel. And we see more going off now as well. Rafael Yerushalmi, stay with me. I would like to continue the conversation once we get back, but we are going out now for a short break. But when we get back, we'll discuss possible mediation efforts by Egypt as well as Qatar and the United Nations to possibly consider putting some kind of hindrance or ceasefire on this conflict that only seems to be heating up. But perhaps the storm will come before the calm, especially if Hamas does indeed decide to get involved. Once again, you are watching a special coverage here on I-24 News, an extended edition covering day 4 of Operation Shield and Arrow by the IDF, their operation taking place in the Gaza Strip. We'll have much more when we get back. 2 minutes. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Middle East is changing. Old alliances make way for new partnerships.
Bigger threats lead to new relationships, and shared goals mean new opportunities.
We speak to those who know the inside story and are at the heart of the changes.
Don't get caught up with the same old story.
Find out what's happening in Middle East Now.
Middle East Now on I-24 News.
The I-24 News team of talented correspondents are working hard for you. They're in the markets, on the streets, in the battlefields, getting the pulse of the story. Tune in for Beyond the Headlines to see how the top stories of the week are affecting real people. No commentary, no debate, just the best stories presented by our best journalists.
Should I go to VivaTech in Paris this June?
VivaTech is Europe's biggest startup and tech event. This is where business meets innovation. Jumpstart business deals with the leaders in tech. Discover cutting-edge innovation. Meet the brightest minds changing the world.
Is it worth it?
Weren't you listening? It's the #1 startup and tech event in Europe. Be there.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us here on our special coverage on I-24 News Extended Edition on the Operation Shield and Arrow by the IDF that they are conducting in Gaza. Meanwhile, according to Israeli media reports, Israel has cut off talks for a ceasefire agreement with Palestinian Islamic Jihad after the terror group renewed intense rocket fire on Israel Friday morning. The rocket attack shattered several hours of calm that had raised hopes overnight for a deal to end the hostilities amid efforts by Egypt, Qatar and the United Nations to broker indirect talks. Ceasefire efforts had been held up by Islamic Jihad's demand that Israel halt targeted assassinations in the Strip, a proposal Jerusalem rejected outright. Both sides have threatened that fire will be met with fire, and until one stops, neither will the other. Joining me now from Cairo in Egypt is Hussein Hariri, a former Egyptian assistant foreign minister and the former director for the Israel Department for the Egyptian Foreign Ministry. And still with me here in studio, Rafael Yerushalmi, a former senior intelligence officer in the IDF and a security analyst. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for joining me here this evening. And with your permission, I'd like to bounce between the ceasefire or potential ceasefire efforts as well as the current operation. And starting with you, Hussein, ceasefire negotiations appear to be all but stalled following the renewed attacks today being Friday. So where do we go to from here? What is Egypt's position?
Well, our position is to prevent further escalation in the showdown, the military showdown between the Israelis and the al-Jihad, the Islamic Jihad. This latest round of infighting or military confrontation goes back to May 2nd after the announcement of the death of the Palestinian prisoner. So we believe that as long as the Israelis maintain their aggressive policies towards the Gaza Strip, I guess we will be in this vicious circle. This is not the first time that the Israeli forces attack the Gaza Strip. We stopped counting in not only in Egypt, but in the Arab world. As a matter of fact, how many times the Israelis went on the attack against the Palestinian resistance in the Gaza Strip. And the second thing, madam, the bottom line is that as long as the Israeli siege to the Gaza Strip that dates back to 2007 would remain, I guess it would be impossible to imagine calm, tranquility, peace between the Palestinians in Gaza.